Okay,
Still there?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the delay is, but here with Just a Walking Fish, whose channel I have linked in my description, and I beg you guys not to subscribe to his channel because it
Oh, good.
because he's way ahead of me, and that just ain't right.
I'm only 30 subs ahead of you. Although I
Yeah.
haven't gained any subs except I got a sub from Scott Duke this morning. I saw.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if we subscribe to your channel, you're just going to get encouraged to make more videos. I put that in the description.
We'll see about that. I gained like pretty much all of my subs. I gained within about a month of me making my first videos.
Yeah.
And then since then, I haven't made anything, so I haven't gained any subs.
Yeah, well, you will as soon as you start making them. Your channel will your channel will shoot up. You make good content, so
thank you. Yeah, I try. I think I don't know. I don't really care too much about my channel, which is why I haven't uploaded in a while. I mostly just started it so that I could talk about shit that I couldn't talk about at home. And if people want to watch me, that's good.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it was mostly for me because I'm a selfish asshole.
Yeah, we all are.
Mm-hmm.
At the rip. So let's see. So Otangelo and information. The whole thing with information keeps. I don't know. I'm gonna put my silly little sketch thing up here. So they were making fun of me about the pudding, about the books, and now they're making fun of me about the colored pencils, crayons.
Oh.
On my,
and you can't forget them making fun of you about your previous addictions as well.
Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah.
I guess, make fun of me about that. Anyway, but I like to draw a little bit because it focuses my mind, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
My drawings are crap, but let's see. So sharing that.
If you can understand your own drawings, that's what matters because it's mostly to organize your brain, right?
Yeah, the nice thing is that it puts. I'm less OCD, not much less, but a little bit less, or less ADHD if I can engage myself, basically engage my motor skills. So like when I go and do an interview, I always drag out a piece of paper and I just put my pen down on the paper and that's all I have to do. I might doodle a little bit, but it engages a part of my brain that calms me down. So
yeah, that's kind of how I am with writing. I feel like it helps me like organize my thoughts and like focus a bit.
Yep. And of course, it's not working.
Why would it when you're live, right?
Yeah, right. All right. Why would it work? Okay, you bastard. It's frozen. It's just so frozen. And if I squish it, okay, there's notability. It's supposedly firing up. Not firing up. Damn you. Okay. Okay. And it's still not firing up. What am I going to do? Damn, are we live?
Yeah, all I can see is a black screen right now.
Yeah, no, it's just not firing up. It's they have problems with the app. This is the one that Sean Carroll uses.
Is this the one that you made?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the one we made actually works. This is the one that Sean Carroll uses.
Okay.
So, and you can recognize the background from his drawings. He's so much better at it than I am. But anyway, I don't know about this crashing thing. I wonder if it crashes for him too. So anyway, I wanted to draw my little picture. So when we started studying information, as human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had one human being connecting to another human being. And basically we wanted to study what happens when information goes that way. And of course, there are three elements to this thing. There is the information itself, or the sign, basically. And there is the like the interpreter and the sender, right? Or the sender and the receiver. Could do a receiver. So we have, he doesn't have any legs. Okay. But anyway, so what we're doing is we're trying to understand information. And and forgive me if hopefully this will be simple enough that I can actually get my point across this time. So but the thing is that we are out here as human beings trying to understand information, right? Mm-hmm. So we are viewing this as a system, as a closed system. And we're saying, there are two human beings. There's always a sender, there's a receiver. And then of course we can say, oh, there has to be intelligence in order to create this, right? So then we start to study information and we know quite a bit about it. And then we get to the point where we say, well, instead of this here, we have basically DNA, and a phenotype. Mm-hmm. So we're extending the idea, we have, okay, the DNA is, how the hell do we do this? Basically, the DNA is the information or is the physical information. And what's sending it? Where's the intelligence that's sending it in this scenario?
Yeah.
So that's where it gets a little strange. The meaning of the information is going to be the phenotype, what's created. The information is going to be the DNA. And then what do we have over here? Well, we obviously have your mama and daddy, and their mama and daddy, and their mama and daddy, and whatever, all the way back. But these guys look at this, and what they do is they make the mistake of dragging this guy back in and saying, oh, because we started to understand information using human beings that communicate with each other and have intelligence, then they extract the intelligence part of it, and they say that has to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the whole DNA thing is kind of what got me to start changing my mind on it. Because I don't know, I still would say I'm like fairly agnostic, but before I was pretty firmly in the information, like the things we interpret as information is physical, but the interpretation is not physical, right? But I don't know, the whole system of gene expression doesn't require any sort of, it requires interpretation, but it doesn't require interpretation from a consciousness.
Right.
And you can start, extrapolating this out, right? Like the path of a river, you could say that's information and the interpretation is the geological landscape. You know what I mean? And that's sort of where I'm at. Like, I understand that it's kind of a slope without any necessarily like strict bounds. Once you start saying that things in the physical world are informative without intelligent agency, then I don't know where you would draw the line. And I guess like I would still say, there's not any inherent differences between like different classes of supernovas, right? And the information, the interpretation of the information is our minds, but our minds are still physical, right? So that whole diagram you just drew with like the arrows and stuff, the human is now inside that diagram. Yeah. And the planet's the other side. So I think that does make sense. So I'm starting to lean towards physicality now.
But, yeah. And the thing is, when we study information, okay, we have one human being here, and we have a human being here, we have the sender, and we have the receiver, and then we have some physical form like sound waves, basically sound waves, and we're sending it. What we're doing is we're abstracting out the idea of what's happening here. And for semiotics, we would have, basically the sign itself, which would be the sound waves. And then we have the, let's see, how the hell is this? The sound waves, we have the interpreter, the person that's receiving it. And then we have the object that they get out of it, basically. Like if I say to you, bear, okay, bear, okay, that's the sound bear, and you have knowledge of bear over here, so that you're the interpreter, and you run away. Basically, that's the meaning or the pragmatics of it. So that's how they do it for science. So what we're doing is we're abstracting away information, and what they do is when they abstract away information, they make the category error of folding the person back into the observer, right?
Mhm.
So they're constantly breaking the system that we've set up in order to understand a physical thing and abstract away from that physical thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
People
I
always do that.
I do agree. This is the one area that I'm getting caught up on the physicality, right? When you're talking about abstractions, but not just abstractions, but like abstractions that aren't real, right? So like whenever y'all talked about it last time, I think you were talking about the dragon, right? There's nothing necessarily real or physical about dragons.
Right.
So in that sense, how would the information be physical? I'm trying to figure out myself, like
Okay.
what I think on it.
How would the dragon be physical if you think of a dragon as information?
Well, when you say the word dragon, just like you said with bear, right? When you say
Right.
the word dragon, an image of a dragon pops into your mind, you know, like a
Right.
big fire breathing, scaly lizard thing with wings.
Yep.
But that's not a real thing. You
Yep.
know, that's already an abstraction. So you're providing a description of an abstraction. And while the medium of that description is physical, like it's being transmitted right now through like, I mean, to your ears eventually through sound waves, but it's going through multiple different levels of like, you know, electrical charges and, you know, radio waves and stuff like that. But in our minds, is the dragon a real thing? It's not, even though it's not based in physicality. I guess, would that mean that like the sender and the interpretation are both in your mind? And since your mind is physical, would that be what you're saying or what?
Yeah, if we're going to study that, no, we've gone to an entirely different plane here. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think this is where I'm getting caught up on, because I can accept that, like, you know, describing a bear is rooted in physicality, and also like, you know, DNA is physical and all that other stuff.
Okay.
But it, for me, it's just when you get to the point of abstractions about abstractions.
Yep. So when I say dragon, okay, you're over here. How is it you think that you understand what a dragon is?
What do you mean? Like, where did I learn about the ideas of dragons and stuff?
Yeah, where'd you come up with the idea of a dragon?
I don't know. Probably like movies and stuff when I was little. Maybe stories, fables, that kind of stuff.
Okay, and if you were like early man, maybe you saw a lizard.
Yeah, or like a dinosaur skull or something.
Yeah, or something like that. There's a lizard. That's my lizard. What the hell is that? I don't know what just popped up. Anyway, yeah. So there was something about the physical world, basically, that trained you to understand what a dragon was. And it may have been movies, but you know, for primitive man, it would have been like lizards and, you know, shit like that. And we imagine, oh my God, what if that thing was 18 feet tall? So basically you're being trained what a lizard is. And you come up here and you have an idea, and it really is no different than bear, because you learn about bears exactly the same way. How do you know? How many bears have you seen?
Quite a few, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, bears are not super common where I live, but I've always grown up like going to zoos and stuff.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Yeah. Bears are really common where I live. So
yeah.
They used to chase us out of the woods once in a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's learning from a physical experience.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, there are things in the world that we put in our brain, but now if we're going to talk about, we're not talking about information per se. We're talking about neuroscience, and we're talking about the development of the human being. We're talking about the development of that interpreter, right? And that's where we get really hung up on this stuff. And you're going to find that the believers, oh, Tangelo wants to come in. If I explain it to you, evidently you're still not getting why information is immaterial. Maybe we'll have Otangelo in. Hopefully you can hang around for a little while until we get our discussion done, Otangelo, because I do kind of want to talk to you today again. Why would I? Oh, okay, I won't say anything. I'm going to put a ball gag on and I'm sorry. I said it. Anyway, I'm a masochist. I will talk to you again. I'm still saying it. I got to shut the fuck up. I'm going to piss D'Angelo off. I'm sorry. Okay, so we're talking about, you know, the thing is that as soon as you start talking about real simple information like this in semiotics, and we're doing an abstraction on a physical system, and then all of a sudden people start wanting to talk about abstract. What is an abstract thing? Well, what is an abstract thing? An abstract thing is something that you learned from the world over here, and you put in your brain, because when you were born, you were this tiny little stick figure here, right? Crawling around on the floor, and you didn't know shit about dragons. And the world impinged upon you, and it created this massive, now we're into neuroscience.
It's a very generous stick figure.
What's that?
So it's a very generous stick figure. It's like some 3-legged, spiky-headed monster. A long neck.
Yeah. Anyway, so so the world impinges upon you and teaches you what all this stuff is, and that's how you get abstract. So abstracts are only from the world. Like when you were when I was a child, Mom had 2 oranges and taught me that it was different than having 1 orange, which is different than having 3 oranges. And these are things in the world. So, I mean, the number 3, while we're using our minds, our minds are a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we keep forgetting that it's a tool, and we confuse the tool with the reality. And that is the same as when you have, that's a really bad moon. It's the moon, there's a merimbrium, whatever. Okay, I am pointing at the moon, and you are the child, my little stick figure. I need a stock stick figure. You are looking at my finger instead of the fucking moon. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like if you point at the moon, a very young baby will look at your finger, not at the moon. If you try to point at a mouse, your cat will look at your finger, not the mouse. It drives you crazy. So anyway, that's the finger for the moon. But the thing is, your mind is a tool, and we have to stop confusing the tool with what we're talking about. I mean, if we're trying to do a physical system and we're trying to make sense of the world with science, right? Then we have to stand outside of that as gods. So this is the God's eye view that we're taking. Okay, and we have to look back at that world and try to figure out what we can describe here and here and here. And if one of the things we are describing is ourselves, we have to represent ourselves as a stick figure inside of this object as a physical thing. And if we don't do that, if we constantly swap between worlds,
you just lost the screen share.
Oh shit! How did I do that?
I have no idea.
I didn't do anything.
Did the thing crash or something? Or?
No. Apparently, my screen mirroring program crashed. Which is interesting. That has never done that. Michael's MacBook. Yes, I'm trying to do that. Okay, so I think it's
dirty Mac user.
Yeah, it's too bad. And the weird thing is that it quit the application crashed.
Okay.
That was what do you call it? I'm using an app called Reflector 3, and Reflector 3 actually crashed.
Okay. Well,
anyway,
so whenever you take out yourself for like the whole God's eye view and you put yourself outside of the system,
yep,
wouldn't that also remove the physical interpreter from the system as well? Because you are the physical interpreter.
Yeah, but we got the physical system, and the thing we want to study is ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's say you're studying a planet, right? Like Jupiter or something.
Okay.
And I'm still getting caught up on this. Without interpretation, Jupiter's just, a gas giant. Right? It's not even a gas giant. It's just a collection of matter somewhere in the universe. So if you're removing yourself from the physical interpretation, then aren't you removing, or if you're removing yourself from the physical realm being studied, I guess, then aren't you removing also the physicality of the interpretation? That's where I'm getting caught up, I guess.
Okay, yeah, and I think that is the crux of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're out here, right? There it goes again.
Did it crash again?
Fuck. It froze again.
Did the drawing program freeze, or did your screen share freeze
The
again?
drawing program froze.
Oh, crash?
Yeah, it crashed again.
Nice.
And it's crashing again. It's crashing all over the goddamn place. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Now I know what your home screen looks like on your iPad.
Yeah, I know you do. I dox myself. Jeez, look at that. And now I come up with that. Okay, so fine. And you're still looking at notability, and I'm looking at. I can draw again.
Okay, I can see you draw as well, so I think we're good.
Okay, so anyway, so we're studying Jupiter, right? We're studying Jupiter. Why would we ever want to talk about the gods? We are the god.
Well, but by inserting a god, you're also inserting something that's immaterial, aren't you? You're losing the physical intermediate step.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure if I follow that. Okay, we're taking a God's eye view, and the first rule of God's eye view club is you never talk about the gods.
Yeah, well, okay, so this is where you're kind of losing me. When you drew the first diagram where you had like the DNA and then its interpretation via like ribosomes and stuff, and its expression as the phenotype.
Okay.
Right. So just keeping the same analogy, you have Jupiter, and then you're losing its physical interpretation and expression because you're missing the second part of the equation, right? Because you just removed the interpreter and you removed what's seeing the information and how that information is being expressed.
Okay, but you see what you did there. Okay, we're talking about Jupiter, so we're talking about gases, we're talking about helium and hydrogen, and we're talking about planets. Okay. And where are we ever talking about the interpreter?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think information has to have an interpreter, be it physical or
not. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we want to talk about Jupiter as information, that would be a different subject.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, wait. So then, what are you trying to describe it as?
Okay. So I was just starting with, we're talking about the physical world, and we're taking a God's eye view of the physical world, and we're talking about hydrogen and helium in a planet. Mm-hmm. Okay. But now let's talk about information. Okay. So now what we have to do is we're still not going to talk about the gods. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to put a representation of ourselves in the picture right here, right?
Okay.
So now we have a physical human who is observing Jupiter with his eyes. And now we can talk about the information that is the light pattern coming from the sky or through our binoculars, right?
Okay.
But we're talking about a physical thing. So we can't keep going out here and trying to talk about the gods.
Well,
if you want to talk about the gods, we got to put a representation of ourselves in here and then talk about Jupiter.
So what's the point of having the God representation in the first place then? Is it to remove bias or?
Yeah, it's okay. This is the meta discussion, basically. What are we doing? What kind of a talk are you and I going to have about the world, right? Yep. So I'm saying to you, okay, let's pretend we're gods outside of the world, and we're going to try to figure out what's going on inside the world. But we're never going to talk about ourselves. We're not going to keep bouncing out here and talking about God ourselves. We're simply talking about what is inside the world. Okay, that's all we want to talk about. So now you say, oh, I want to talk about my interpretation of Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, in order to do that, we still can't bop out here and talk about gods.
So basically, what you're saying is that the God sees the physical description, right? So like
nope. You just talked about God.
Well, so if we're not allowed to talk about the God, then what's the point of having the God in the system?
Because that is the meta discussion that we have before we start discussing reality. Okay.
What I'm just saying is
I
like,
got rid of them.
so is the God basically the recognition that, you know, what we see is real, and
No,
then the interpretation of what those facts are is the information?
no, the God's eye view is a tool that we agree to use as human beings to have a discussion about the universe, about the physical world. So we're going to talk about it in the beginning of our discussion, and then we're going to not talk about it anymore.
Okay.
Okay. So if you want to talk about God, or if you want to talk about observers observing Jupiter, if you want to talk about neuroscience now, well, then we're going to have to put a representation inside of our physical world.
Well, even without talking about neuroscience, I still think the information that describes Jupiter requires an interpreter. And that doesn't require any neuroscience discussion. All it really requires is the recognition that the brain is physical, right? And you don't even have to mention that step because we can all, that's sort of a premise everyone agrees on.
Yeah, but how are you going to talk about what information are you talking? You see,
Let's just say like atmospheric composition.
okay, we're talking about that. Okay.
Well, I mean, like,
That's not really information, though.
what do you mean?
We're talking about what Jupiter's actually made of. We're trying to figure out what it's made of with no humans around.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that is informative, right? If you know what Jupiter's atmosphere is, like what its atmospheric composition is, that's information, right? Like that would be something that you could prescribe to Jupiter to help someone visualize it.
But why, if we're talking about physics, why would you want to start talking about information?
I think information, I would say all sciences require information, right? To get to any conclusion. Like, are you saying that the atmospheric composition isn't informative? Or it isn't information?
Yes, but then we're talking about how we're doing science, and then we have to put ourselves in the picture. So we have to have a human being there. We're talking about a human interpretation of that stuff, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I just think that from the baseline level, the human has to be there, or at least something has to be there.
Oh, no. Bad physicalist.
Well, no, like I agree that like it's rooted in physicality, and I think it is ultimately physical because, you know, every step of the process from, you know, propagation to interpretation is ultimately physical.
Yep.
But I don't think I think the information itself also requires the interpretation of that information, because without that, it's not informative, right?
Not following you.
Well, what use is it to, like, if you know the atmospheric composition of Jupiter, that's information. If you don't know the atmospheric composition of Jupiter, that's not information. That's by definition uninformative. But by knowing something, you require the interpreter.
Okay, so let's pretend that you and I are right here. Okay, there's two of us.
Okay.
I'm not going to draw our sticks, right? And we agree that we're going to be talking about the atmospheric composition or the physical composition of Jupiter, right?
Okay.
Why do we care about information at this point?
Well, because I would say that the atmospheric composition is information about Jupiter, because it's something that allows you to describe Jupiter, just like how bears having fur is one of the things that you can use to describe bears.
But you see what you've done. Now you want to have this conversation.
What do you mean? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's the only conversation that you can really have about information, like with the people already in the physical world.
Yeah, okay, if we want to talk about information, but I'm trying to back you up to the point where we're not talking about information. We're talking about Jupiter, right? We're not talking about information.
So if that's not information, then what would you call it? Like
Jupiter?
Any description? Yeah, descriptions about Jupiter. If that's not information, what would you call it?
Oh, that is information, but we're not talking about information. We're talking about Jupiter. I'm trying to get you to talk about Jupiter without talking about gods.
Well, I don't think it's possible to talk about something without using information that describes that thing. Right?
Right.
Like, how can you talk about a bear without talking about, the plantigrade feet, the fur, the caniform body plan, that kind of stuff? How can you talk about Jupiter without talking about things like its size, its atmospheric composition, et cetera, et cetera? And those are information.
Yes. So how do we talk about a table without talking about a hammer?
I think that's kind of a non sequitur. It's more like, how do you talk about a wooden table without talking about the wood that it's made of?
Okay. Yeah, we can talk. Okay, the wood that it's made of. We have a table, and we have the wood that it's made of. But you're wanting to go out and talk about information when we're talking about the table. You're talking about the hammer, how we built the table. So you're
what would
using,
that analogy be for Jupiter?
okay, the analogy for the hammer is God's eye view. Okay, that's how basically that's how we do things. That's how we know things. That's how we take things apart. Okay, but we don't want to talk about any of that. We just want to talk about what we have here. We have a table.
Yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with Kathy in the comments, if you've been keeping up with it. I think he's having some interesting input there. But he's saying that information is necessarily required to transmit it in a discussion, right? Like, if you want to describe something, you have to have information already.
Perception of reality necessarily requires an observer to perceive the reality. The problem is you cannot separate the measurement from the instrument that's doing the measurement. I'm going to ignore it. Let's go to neuroscience or religion would seem relevant here.
Yeah, I don't have any neuroscience or philosophy background. I'm just talking out of what I'm thinking.
A human being there or some instrument of measurement to be a technological tool or human brain. No. I begin to understand what I am up against here.
Well, no, like I said, I would agree that information is physical. Like, you've convinced me to that point. I just don't see how the God's eye view gets rid of information that's already physical, like the need for information that's already physical. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with you up until that point, I'd say.
Okay. I'm wanting to talk about DNA.
Okay.
And you're wanting to talk about scientists reading DNA.
Not necessarily. I'm talking about a physical observation, right? So, like you were saying, the expression.
But you said the word observation.
Yeah, that was I would say that was kind of poor language choice. I was thinking more of interpretation than expression or than observation. So, like, the information is DNA, and the expression is the phenotype, and the transmission of it would be like gene expression. And all of those are physical processes that don't necessarily have a scientist involved, but that's still a physical transmission of information.
Right.
And that doesn't require the God's eye view unless you're trying to describe those processes, right? If it's just those processes happening, it's information being transmitted without any observers.
Okay, let's see if we can sketch this out here. Okay, so we got DNA, okay, which is basically a sequence of physical nucleotides, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there it is right there. And then we have DNA inside of a cell.
Okay.
Okay. And inside of a cell, there are other things called tRNAs laying around that conveniently have exactly the right amino acid to read that codon, right? So we have the 3-pronged anticodon right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes ahead and assembles a protein, okay?
Skipping the mRNA step, but yeah.
A purely physical process, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, with biochemistry, we never have to use the word information. We don't need it, okay? Just do not need it. We can talk all day long about basically the biochemistry of that. Okay. But now we want to take it to another level, and we want to say, what the hell is biological information? So we're going to look at that codon, and we're going to notice that basically every three, we have a particular amino acid. And so now we've taken and abstracted biology or biochemistry to the point where we can start talking about biological information, right? How it gets transmitted. Mm-hmm. So what we've done is we've abstracted away we've taken a physical thing in biology, which has not a goddamn thing oh my God, it crashed again. It's back. It's kind of back. I don't know it's like back, but it's like expanded. Okay. So now we've abstracted away this information. So now we're going to use information theory, which is something we learned from us talking together. Mm-hmm. And we come up with a model, and we've taken this physical substance and we've abstracted it, and we've made it kind of like, okay, now we're two human beings communicating. But let's think for a minute. Okay, DNA is the information, right? The sequence, the DNA sequence is information. Okay.
Okay.
So what is the receiver?
The receiver would be the expression of the phenotype if you're looking at it from that, or if you're just doing it in the wild without an observer, and if you're trying to read the DNA sequences, like as a person, the receiver would be the person.
Right. This is my lizard. Okay. So DNA makes a lizard. He's got a forked tongue. Okay. Kind of like Smokey.
A gomed lizard.
Oh, he's got a tail. We got to give him a tail. Okay. And we'll give him some fins. Okay. There's our lizard. So that's a phenotype. Okay. So, but why not say, and I say, oh, bullshit, you fucking biologists. I want to talk about DNA being translated into a proteome instead. Okay. So here's my receiver. And you say, oh, here's my receiver. And somebody else says, how did I fuck that up? Proteome. Protomome? Jesus.
Protomome.
Protomome. It's a protomome. And of course, this is going to crash on me again. Just any second now, it's going to crash. Proteome. Okay. So you see the thing we've done here? I mean, we got one guy talking about, oh, the receiver is a proteome. We got another guy saying, oh, no, it's a lizard, the phenotype.
Okay.
We got another guy saying, what else can we do? No. I'm a doctor. I'm interested in what it does to the cell. So the cell that is created, the tissue type, mm-hmm. That's my receiver. Okay. So you see what we have here. We have a choice, right? It's obvious that what we're doing is we're trying to shoehorn information into biology. We're trying to create abstractions, and we have we have the doctor, we have the biologist, and we have the biochemist all saying, oh no, you're wrong, different information.
Well, I don't think they're saying each other are wrong. I think it's useful to look at this information on multiple levels.
Right. Yeah. What we've done here is we've got an abstraction. We're abstracting information. We're trying to shoehorn it into communication, which is something we all understand, because mm-hmm. That's what we're doing right now, badly. Well, I guess that's subjective, isn't it? But anyway, who's the sender?
The sender would be the DNA.
That's the DNA is the sequence. That's the information. That's the sound wave.
I would say the DNA is the sender. Like the actual root of the information is the DNA, and then the sending would be whatever medium you're analyzing it from, like sequencing the genome, or just viewing its phenotype, etc.
Okay, so the ribosome would be the medium, or the
Sure, if you're looking at protein expression, yeah, the ribosome would be the medium.
or the process of translation would be the medium.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see what you've done again is you've changed the model entirely from what I was looking at.
No, well, then it just goes to the next step. I think.
It's
how does that
another,
change the model?
okay, so we have the process of translation. So what is the receiver?
The receiver would be the protein expression, the phenotype, whatever else you were talking about.
Those three things.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it could also be basically an entire ecology. We could look at it as an entire ecology, and we could say, there's a set of DNA, multiple organisms, right? Mm-hmm. But you see, what we've done is we just created a different model of information from this here.
Well, like I said, I think looking at information in different contexts is a useful thing, as long as you're able to define it as information.
Yep.
Right? Just looking at it as like, oh, well, DNA is the only thing about it, it is kind of not very useful. I don't know.
Right. So we're taking a God's eye view, and we're creating all of these abstract models, basically different models of something in reality.
Well, I think there's also multi-tiered information, right? So if the final result is the phenotype, then that's just the final result. If you're analyzing the phenotype, then you're adding another layer of information. The phenotype doesn't have any descriptive information by itself unless someone's looking at the phenotype, taking notes on it, and then interpreting the phenotype.
See what you did? You started talking about the gods again.
Well, yeah, but I think without interpretation, the actual information doesn't really matter, right? Like I don't think information exists without a medium of that information. And the DNA is information, or the DNA is informative for the phenotype. But the phenotype, if you're analyzing the phenotype itself is the root now. And so the phenotype would be the sender, the medium would be light waves or something, and then the receiver would be the scientist there, who is describing that information. And you can track that back through multiple levels of information. And I don't think any of those levels ever leave physicality, but I think information still requires interpretation.
Yeah, we can come up with thousands and hundreds and probably an infinite number of models to interpret this DNA system. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And we can come up with, like, the extended synthesis is basically you've got the DNA, and then you've got the cell.
Yeah.
You have the cell, and then you have the tissue or the organ, and then you have the organism, and then you have, outside of that, you have basically the ecosystem, right, with all the organisms, okay? And there are multiple levels of feedback between all of these different things, and they feed forward, and basically this is the extended synthesis in evolution.
Yeah.
Which there are a number of ways to model it. Right. But I mean, these are all, we don't ever want to talk about the gods, because we are human beings. We are trying to understand the physical world without us. We're trying to understand, because we know that 5 million years ago, there were no us. There were no gods to talk about this shit.
Yeah, but there were still pigs that could recognize your phenotype.
Okay, let's go back another 4 billion years.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, 4 billion years, you might have like light sensitive organisms that could see that information. But if you go back before any life at all,
raise you a billion. Yeah.
Okay. And at that point, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a transmission of information, because there's no interpretation of that information.
Oh, but if one planet bumps into another planet, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I call that information transfer.
Yeah, actually, I would be inclined to agree with you there.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any analysis of that information going on. So there's not that extra step of information to getting to where it's useful for a description.
Incredulity. Otangelo, your middle name is incredulity.
Yeah, dude, last night you laughed at me for saying that we came from something that would have looked like a worm. Like,
use their time and efforts to unravel the amazing evidence of the creation of nature to give him glory. Okay, you're preaching. We're trying to, I'm having enough trouble with Walker trying to get him to quit talking about the gods. Do you not see what I'm getting at? I'm getting at a purely physical description of reality without any humans or interpreters. And if you want to talk about information, then you are necessarily creating a model.
Yeah.
And we can do that too. And we can talk about a model on a physical system without ever talking about our minds or anything inside of ourselves.
Yeah, but you can't explain that model to other people without, using a transmission of information that inherently requires the mind.
Yeah, but we don't have to talk about that because we're not talking about that. We're talking about physicality.
But, by writing a paper, you're not necessarily telling someone, but you're still describing the information.
Yeah, but when you write a paper, do you start out by telling them, "Hey, I'm employing this greased, compressed sheet of wood, and I'm going to be putting some ink particles on it, and I'm going to be using a language called English." You don't do that in the beginning of the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And also, just before we got super off topic, and I definitely want to come back to that point, I just wanted to mention the thing about Otangelo. I completely agree. Theistic scientists do try to do that, and they do that rather successfully, and that's why I don't think YECs are scientists. Because they're not honestly interpreting evidence. They're not trying to unravel what happened in creation. They're just, saying like, okay, well, here's what this book says. So instead of actually honestly looking at stuff, I'm just going to say, okay, so how can I shoehorn it? You are saying the exact same thing about atheists that YECs do every day. And I don't have any problems with theistic evolutionists and all that kind of stuff, and people who are honest Christians that are trying to interpret how God did it and interpret God's work. But that's a huge problem with the whole YEC worldview.
Right.
Anyways, back to information.
Yeah. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get strictly down to a methodological naturalism where we only look at, we never talk about the gods. We're not going to talk about scientists or observer effects or any of that bullshit. We are two people out here, and granted, we are actually in this model, okay, that we're talking about, but we're not going to talk about that because we are gods and we're taking a God's eye view. So we're never going to talk about that kind of information. So we're trying to create an entirely physical model of information that has no humans involved ever. There's no, like, if I were to, so I had this physical system, and then I created a model, and now I'm going to try and describe that model. I'm automatically going outside of the category that I'm trying to work in. Okay, and now talking about the description of the model, which is a different kind of information than the actual model. If I have DNA as a sequence, right? There's three codons, and I describe that.
Mm-hmm.
That description is automatically done by a describer. Right?
Yeah, I agree, but I'm just saying, like, any sort of science requires a describer. Anything requires a describer if it's wanting to be conveyed.
So when you go to class and they start talking to you about the structure of DNA, do they start talking about the describer?
Well, I mean, barring the fact that they usually do go into like historical stuff.
They don't.
Well,
they talk about the thing.
Yeah, but that's because the describer's a given, right? If they weren't talking to a class full of people, then there wouldn't be anything to talk about.
Would there be nothing to talk about if the tree didn't fall in front of a bear?
Well, I mean, in that situation, the bear is still receiving and interpreting information, right? And all the plants around it are receiving, interpreting information.
Yeah, there's physicality. I mean, like
I don't think the observer has to be a human. I don't think the observer even has to be like conscious in any way. But I do think information inherently requires a describer and a describee.
I don't think so. That isn't how I. Why in the hell? Oh, okay, it does work. Okay, so that isn't how I define information. I define information like this. Okay, I have a grid here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
okay, so this is my grid, and I have a particle here, and I have a particle here, and I have one over here. So this is 0, 1, 2. Okay. 0, 1, 2. So that is 2, 2.
Okay.
So that's where that particle is in space.
Yeah, but by putting those numerical values on it, you're also requiring observation and interpretation.
You just started talking about the gods again.
That's what I'm saying, though. I think you have to have the gods.
No.
You have to have the observer. If you just have particles floating around in space, that's not informative. That's not information. Unless you start studying those particles, there's not any information there.
Okay. I'm saying that this is I0, information 0. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is 4, 5. Bad 4. Okay. I'm saying that this is information 0. We're talking about where things are in space. And then outside of that, we can talk about basically a different kind of information 1, which is descriptive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, is its position in space not descriptive?
These are two different things. And you got to get that. You've got to figure that out. Okay. This is information, physical information without any humans around. And this part is where humans start to define the information.
But that's what I'm saying. I think for something to be called information, it has to be informative. And to be informative, it has to have interpretation. If it's not being interpreted, then it's not informative or information.
So let's call it physicalation. Okay, would that make you happy? We call I0 physicalation, and we call this information.
Sure. Yeah. Because I agree that these things exist, right? Like I'm not saying that this undescribed chemical process isn't happening somewhere in a thermal vent, but without studying like what's going on, it's not information. But yeah, so those particles do exist in that place in space. But if no one's analyzing it or nothing is analyzing it, it doesn't necessarily have to be a conscious entity. Then I don't think it's information.
Okay, so all I had to do to make you happy is call it physicalation instead of information.
Yeah.
Do you see what just happened here?
Well, yeah, because like I said, the information requires the medium and the receiver, right? But the physicalation, I guess, would just be another word for like the sender.
We're hung up on the word.
Yeah. Well, I mean, wasn't this to debate information? And like,
yeah. Okay. So what that tells me is we should get rid of the fucking word entirely. We shouldn't talk about information anymore. We should call it something else. We should call it.
I still think information has its uses in context, right?
Not unless you want to talk about the gods.
But whenever, like I said, whenever a scientist is writing a paper and says, "Here's the data, here's the information that supports me," they're already assuming an observer, right? They're assuming that there's going to be someone there to also interpret the information that they just put out.
Okay, and I'm here to tell you that is exactly the kind of thinking that ends up creating Otangelos.
I agree to an extent, but also doesn't Otangelo think that like the soul is like separate from the body and the soul is what is doing the interpretation? So
Well,
in that way, it's not physical. I would still say information is physical. I'd just say information requires interpretation. And I don't think that interpretation needs to be, conscious either.
okay. Physicality is what we're talking about.
Okay.
And we never have to talk about anything else. In fact, if I want to talk about human beings, I can put them in my physical system and I can talk about them as animals. Okay. Over here, you never want to cross this line to start talking about the God's eye view. You never want to talk about the like when you're a scientist and you're providing data, you are hoping that they focus on your data and the physical system you are describing. You are not wanting them to think about you as a perhaps nearsighted scientist.
Yeah, well, but when you're collecting the data, you're requiring instrumentation and observation, right?
Yep.
So that's the information bit. That's the sending and receiving bit. By describing humans as animals, you're transmitting information to me. And that's what I'm saying. So you can't, I don't think you can. There's another guy who said something like you're trying to separate the yin from the yang. I don't think information can necessarily be separated from the observer and the receiver.
I had a yinless yang the other day. It was fucking horrible.
A yinless yang. I'm not familiar with Eastern philosophy at all, so I don't know what this means.
Okay, yin and yang, basically two sides of the same thing. You can't have pain without pleasure. You can't have pleasure without pain. Basically, two things go together. What is the sound of one hand clapping grasshopper?
It's SM.
It sounds like this. Listen, do you hear it? That was one hand clapping.
Yeah.
Okay.
One hand clap.
Okay. Well, you frustrated the hell out of me.
I'm sorry. I like I said, I agree with you up until the godless that's what I'm saying. The God's eye view is still an observer, right? Because you're observing the information. Whether or not you want to talk about the God, it's still present.
Okay, so we have the physical thing. I'm going to show. What the fuck was that? What did it do? It made a thing. Okay, so this is the physical thing, right? And I'm saying that we have to take a God's eye view in order to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just did is you said, let's take a God's eye view of the God. Well, let's take a God's eye view of the God. Let's keep going. Okay.
Well, no, because I disagree with the second God's eye view. Right? If you are the God's eye view.
Yeah, but you did it. You're the one that brought it up because you chose to now talk about the gods.
No, I'm just talking about my interpretation. I like I said, I don't think the God's eye view exists outside of the physical world.
Well, we could look at ourselves interpreting the God's eye view. And then
but I'm saying I normally don't interpret the God's eye view. I just interpret the information that's physical.
Yeah, but that's the thing that people miss is that when we are doing physical science, we necessarily are taking a God's eye view of the universe and we are modeling it, but we cannot talk about ourselves. We have to talk about the physical universe. If you want to be a strict naturalist and a strict physicalist, you can never talk about the gods.
I just simply
I'm never going to get anywhere with you.
Maybe not.
I'm really glad we had this discussion. I do think
it was
useful. What I am up against. Holy fuck.
Well, no, I think, through this discussion, I've gotten to the point that information is entirely physical. I was able to,
okay, good.
All of my ideas there. I just, disagree about, I don't think you need a God to be the interpreter, right? Like I said, you could have, the gene expression, like the actual proteins be the interpreter, right? Those are the receiver, the proteins. And there's nothing physical about that. But to interpret those proteins, you have to have an observer. And you're just creating more layers of information. So I think, every bit of the information process is physical. But
Oh, Molecular Alchemy is here.
Yeah, he's been here a little bit.
Yeah. Should we have Otangelo in? Should we open this up?
We can. If you let Otangelo in, I'm going to use the bathroom as soon as he gets here, and then I'll be back.
Wait a minute. For what? To throw up or?
Oh, no. I just have to use the bathroom. We've been here for an hour, my guy. I chucked the thing of Propel right before I came in.
You youngins with your weak little bladders. Okay. Hang on a second. I'm going to open this up, see who wants to come in.
Okay.
So Molecular, you might come in.
Maybe so.
Anyway, we'll see who wants to come in. But I don't know. I want you to think about okay, this is a meta discussion about thinking. It's a meta discussion about how to do science and how to think about science. And I want you to think about
science, but that's my thing. Like, science is a philosophical outlook, and philosophy requires people.
Oh, so you're one of those fucking people.
I guess. And I think the people are natural, and the philosophy at the end of the day is just brainwaves.
Postmodernist.
I don't know what these words mean. I have no background in philosophy at all.
I've never been entirely clear what a postmodernist is, but basically they say, well, science is just an interpretation. Didn't you just say that? Did you say those words?
I would agree. I didn't say those words, but now I will.
Then I think you are a postmodernist, and basically,
I think interpretations can be more right than others.
I don't know if you know this or not, but these days postmodernists have to sit in the back of the bus. Anyway, but just go away and think about all this, and we'll discuss it some more, maybe privately even.
Yeah, maybe so. I might just need time to reflect on things.
Yeah, and maybe we'll look up postmodernism and see if we can.
That's actually another question I have. What does sophistry mean? I see creationists throw it around all the time, but I as far as I know, is it just like using big words, and they don't like it when you use big words?
It's it's what they're doing. It's what they do. They go out and they learn a little bit, and they get the big words together, and they come back at us, and they say, oh, the ribosome, the fucking ribosomal pausing, and that is sophistry. They are deliberately misleading you.
Okay.
Using some sort of arcane language, right?
So sophistry is essentially like using big words and then gatekeeping with them.
Oh, let's see what the definition. Use of fallacious arguments, especially with the intention of deceiving. Trying to argue that I had benefited in any way from the disaster was pure sophistry. Basically, using a fallacious argument, especially with the intention of deceiving, I guess is it. And what they do is they use big words to deceive. They use their half-ass understanding of science to deceive us into believing in God, basically. PM is a very heterogeneous movement, but largely rejects grand narrative. Oh, and ideologies, rejects rationality.
What is PM?
Postmodernism. Very grand narratives and ideologies. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think postmodernists kind of attack science as sort of being one way of looking at the world, or just another way of looking at the world. They'll try to reduce physicality and everything to some sort of subjective bullshit. But I might have another thing. I'm not sure. Under PM, knowledge and claims and value system. Yeah. So, okay. They're saying basically that it's cultural. We have a cultural way of looking at the world. So,
Well, I would disagree with that. I don't think it's culturally relative. I think, it's relative on us being able to interpret evidence, but I don't think the culture necessarily has something to do with that.
Yeah. So let's see. Walker has not come in. Dear Walker. Otangelo has not come in. God, it was really cool. Joel called Otangelo Michael yesterday. And
you're living in his head.
Yeah, I'm living in his head, I think. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So if you want to take a break.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be back in like a minute or two.
Maybe we lost Otangelo.
I doubt it. He's probably like going to his computer or something.
When your criticism is worthless. He's talking to Dr. Alchemy. Let's see. I gave you a link. Improve them. Improve the link. Biological. Okay. Go ahead. Interdependent factory parks made upon those instructions are of intelligent origin. What? All information storage devices, code languages, blueprints, information transfer, translation ciphers with the purpose of God. God made them all. God made the factories. Is that possible? Did God make the factories? Oh, let's see. Describe the world independently, belief by seeking universal truths. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with this meta discussion of taking a God's eye view and staying the hell out of our subjective observer world and just looking at everything entirely as physical systems on a grid, basically. I probably should have muted, but anyway, let's see. Thought arose to question these assumptions, postulating that claims about the existence of the real. Yeah, okay, they're fucking out of their minds, idealists who.
Okay, I'm back. Is Otangelo here yet?
No, I don't think he's coming in.
Darn.
Molecular is teaching us about postmodernism, which I don't think he cares for. Have only been relevant in Western civilization since the Enlightenment. Let's see. Oh, yeah. We have a PDF. We have a PDF on from that I'm gonna have to look at. Let's see. SFB mod seems yeah.
I don't know. I just see personally, I see science as like the philosophical interpretation of the natural world, or like the description of the natural world is probably a better way to say it. And I think a description requires a descriptor. And without the description, it's just the natural world. And I don't think science and the natural world are necessarily synonymous.
I only see the natural world. I try not to think about basically how I think about it so much. Well, kind of. I mean, I do. Okay, we have, shit, I can't do that. We have the natural world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm trying to figure it out. I'm out here, right, trying to figure it out. And for the time being, I'm out here. And then I figure out planets and I figure out chemistry and, molecules and all that crap. And then at some point, I put myself in there and say, oh, I'm going to figure out what the hell I am. And it's like, oh, I am an animal, number one. And not only am I an animal, but I have a brain. And I can now figure out my brain. And so now I can start figuring out how my brain perceives things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I've gone a step further, but I'm still out here necessarily trying to abstract myself away from what I am observing. I am observing myself, observing basically my brain and how my brain works and how my brain may be wrong. So, but at no point, I mean, we are stuck inside this world. Okay.
Yeah.
We are definitely, our views of the world are necessarily going to be from how we think about ourselves. But here's what I found out about human beings. Okay. We are apes and we make shit like tables and we use tools to make them. Okay. And Otangelo comes along and not only do we use tools, but we use our brain basically to design things, and so we think about things and we use our brain to design them, and then we hammer them together. We go out and cut some wood and we get the fucking nails and all that shit, and we make something. And so what he's doing is he's forgetting that we are animals that use tools to make tables. And he's taking the whole thing and saying, oh, the whole fucking world is made by some other being, right? A bigger one. This is God. This is God. Okay, God made the world, in the same way that we would make a table. So that's the thing that I learned, is that we are anthropomorphic. We constantly want to put upon the world our own form. When they say God was made, or man is made in God's image, basically they are making God in man's image. And that is the mistake that religious people make. And that is what I fucking hate. So what we try to do is get out of this. We try to abstract away from this insane loop.
Well, the problem is, I think you and I would both agree that a total God's eye view is impossible, right? So I guess I'm just cutting out the middleman and already inserting myself into the mix.
Yeah, but don't do so at the peril of your thinking. Don't lose the ability to think about physicality. Don't lose the attempt, the struggle to abstract as much as you possibly can.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. But I don't think you need to leave the physical world to do that.
No, you don't need to leave the physical world. You need to leave your subjective world. You need to, at every point, try to understand that you are just a bunch of fucking goo in your head trying to understand this physical world. The physical world is fine without you. Does not need you. Okay? And you do not want to keep including your own self in that understanding, if you can avoid it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's what I'm saying. Literally my one hang up with your idea is that I think that the information requires someone to like see the information, or not necessarily someone to see the information, but something to like read that information.
Yeah,
we're back on the
we decided to call it physication.
Yeah, physicalism or whatever. Physicalation.
I like physiccation. It's like information.
Physiccation. Okay. Yeah, and I'm fine with that word. The physiccation would be like the actual physical attributes of things.
Right. How things are located in space, where they are, how far apart they are, whether or not they're moving and colliding with each other. All of that shit is physiccation, basically. And then we have descriptive information on top of it. So what you have suggested to me is that the whole idea of bringing the information technology into biology is a very bad one. We should have renamed everything before we did it, right?
Yeah, we should have just called everything physiccation.
Should have called it fucking physiccation. They should have asked me.
But I also disagree, because I think the second you start analyzing the information, or the physiccation, it becomes information.
Yeah. So where'd you go, Tangelo?
He might have rage quit again.
Yeah, he probably did. I'm gonna go watch that.
No, he's here. He's here.
Oh, he is. Where is he? But he's not. Oh, he is there. He's around. I agree with Joel. The Bible is God's words. God is truth. Therefore, the Bible. Yeah, you see, that's the problem, Otangelo. At least you guys in the last half of your video last night, at least were honest about preaching.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly problematic, but I respect that more than the people who swear by, well, all science has to vindicate the Bible, not any science. Because by saying that, you're also admitting that some science doesn't conform to the Bible, right? That
He said that science that does not conform to it is false.
That's what I'm saying. So that's at least an admission that it's not interpretation. It's the actual science that is false. You know what I mean? Yeah. So okay. I respect that more than the people who are like, oh, well, any and all science is automatically proof of the Bible, and it's exclusively down to interpretation. That's false.
Oh my God, Otangelo, you're kind of going off the rails on me. We had soft tissue and fossils. We understand that. We know what's happening there.
Well,
Noah's Ark? No, there is no fucking Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat.
Actually, so it's really interesting. I'm taking a class called Archaeological Hoaxes and Fantasies, and one of the ones that we sort of touched on so far, I think we're going to go more in depth on it, is the whole Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat. And the idea is that the mountain is actually covered by ice, and so Noah's Ark has to exist somewhere below the ice. Right. And I mean, there's just no evidence of that. I don't know how you can say that's a high probability. It's just a mountain covered in ice. And also, I'm pretty sure, like, this is me just talking out of my ass, but I'm pretty sure, isn't the original mountain that they called Mount Ararat supposed to be somewhere in, like, the Sinai Peninsula and not the one in Turkey? I'm not sure. Or something? Yeah, it's something like that. And then also, the soft tissue and fossils is not true. so they were able to isolate some collagen fibers after extensively treating some bone tissue. And then the collagen fibers were most similar to ostriches. And then after that, they found like 4 or 5 other quote unquote soft tissue. They found potential red blood cells. But there's a really big problem with Mary Schweitzer's work in that a lot of people haven't been able to replicate her findings.
Right.
And the only times people have been able to replicate their findings are when they're done in a lab.
I just drew a penis. That's not a penis. It's a bone.
Oh, it's a bone. Yeah. It's a baculum. It's a baculum. But the only time that Mary Schweitzer's work has been replicated, other than the original collagen fiber papers and all that stuff, was when the labs also stored their ostrich tissue in the same lab that they were doing that work. And I think, to me, that's a pretty big sign that it's quite possibly contamination events.
Well, didn't they find that some parts of the bone, some particular chemical in the bone, apatite or something, actually preserved DNA a little bit? Because they've been able
Yeah, it had something to do with iron. I don't really remember. I haven't looked too deeply into that claim. I think...
Well, more than iron, they found out that the mineral of the bone, basically part of the bone that sticks around when it's fossilized, actually preserves a little bit of DNA. So they've been able to get DNA that's 700,000 years old.
Yeah, the oldest
fragments.
DNA, as far as I know, is from either a horse or a rhino from Siberia.
It was a horse, yeah.
Yeah, the oldest human DNA that we have is from about 450,000 years. God, I couldn't say that. 450,000 years from the Pit of Bones, actually. It's Cima de los Huesos, and it's likely Homo heidelbergensis. And then we also have some proteomic sequences from Homo erectus. Also, Otangelo, that directly contradicts the sentence that you just said like 3 minutes ago. You said all scientific evidence points to God, period. And then you literally just said, where is it?
Where the hell did he say that?
Science that does not conform to it is false. It's above that.
No, he said science that does not conform to the Bible is false.
That's what I'm saying. He said science that doesn't so that's an admission that science doesn't always conform to the Bible. And then you just said science confirms the Bible.
No, he said
all science.
He said if science doesn't confirm the Bible, then the science is wrong.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then he said all scientific evidence points to God. And I think those are mutually exclusive statements.
Really?
Yeah.
That's quite what I got out of what he said.
Okay.
Religious atheists cannot admit it because it buries their worldviews without God. Yeah. No. Otangelo's getting more honest here in the last few days.
I like Scott's comment. I can make up bigger numbers than you. So I think the young Earth worldview is inherently false. Like there's nothing that's true about it, barring something like last Thursdayism. And by saying all science that refutes this is false, you're just wrong. I don't think there's anything inherently that refutes a God, right? I don't care if you want to say like God created the first cells, God set the Big Bang off, and then the universe spontaneously did what it did. But no, young Earth creationism is simply wrong. Oh, and what was I going to say? Oh, just something that's a little fun for you. I found a study, and I never got to bring it up to SFT, where the best case scenario for a p-value of Neanderthals not being an outgroup to Homo sapiens was like a z-score of -38 or something, which I got 1 × 10 to the -246. So that completely refutes all genetic studies that's ever been done by a young Earth creationist. Right there. All right. So if you want to pull out numbers, at least I have scientific sources for my numbers. You're just saying like, Herptidur, look at this amino acid sequence. Let me put it to a power of 100.
I think that sums it up. Yak is flat Earth crazy. Oh, shit. Okay. Well, let's see. I think rather than... I mean, with the stuff that Otangelo has said in his chat and the stuff that he sent last night, it's obvious that he's a preacher and he doesn't give a shit about science at all. And no matter how much science he puts in his blog, He only puts science in his blog that says, "Oh, it's complex and therefore God." So, I'm a materialist precept. Well, okay, materialist precept. I will get into what basically how I define naturalism, and I think it has something to do with I don't know where the hell my drawing was, but anyway, no precept. No, I don't have to precept anything. I precept that I can feed myself. That's basically what I precept. I precept that I have a cup of coffee in front of me, and then I'm talking to Walker, and other people are listening to us through the inner tubes, which I think are properly basic beliefs. I mean, if we reject that, then who the fuck are we talking to?
Yeah.
And what are we? And how are we talking? I'm making vibrating noises in my room, and it's going through this microphone. I mean, we have to accept something, and I think that's naturalism in a nutshell. That's all. And if you want to call that presupposition,
well, yeah, I think that's just definitional, like methodological naturalism, right?
Yeah.
Like whether or not there's any metaphysical stuff going on, we can't tell, and everything that we see around us works in natural ways and physical ways.
Yep. Okay, so I think we're done. I think I learned a bit. I'm hoping you'll go think about this God's eye view a little more seriously.
Yeah, I will. I think that's. I mean, like just generally, I don't know if I'll come to the conclusion that you're right or anything, but I think it's harder to change people's mind than just like a 1 hour video. You know what I mean? So don't come away with this as just me saying like, oh, well, you're definitely wrong. I'll definitely go reflect on it.
Okay. Yeah, when you reflect on it, like when you pick up a spoon and you use it to put food in your mouth, think of God's eye view as just that.
Okay.
Okay. But we'll let it go. Hi, Vandalia. We are going to end the broadcast now, and we're going to chat for a few minutes privately, and that'll be it. I'm hoping to do a video on you, Otangelo. He literally heard Speed saying it. I don't know. I probably did say
literally.
Literally. I probably did say it at some point. I don't know. You know, we could discuss it. I might double down on it. Not sure. Molecular Alchemy has said something.
He said that we should talk. That y'all should talk on the phone.
Oh,
later. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. So I'm going to end the broadcast. Goodbye, guys. Thanks for all you chatting and listening. And I didn't pay a lot of attention to chats because I tend to get unfocused if I do that. Mm-hmm. And I'm unfocused enough. God help me. Did I say God help me?
Oh no.
I just prayed.
Freudian slip.
Oh fuck! At the end of my broadcast, and Chancelo's going to say, Speed of Sound literally prayed at the end of his broadcast.
Yeah, okay. I often use Jesus Christ and oh my God as exclamations of surprise. So yeah. I guess those are just Freudian slips of me admitting that I believe in God. Okay, there's this 12-step program that I'm involved with, and I always tell them that my favorite prayer is, God, what the fuck? I mean, that is my favorite prayer. It's like, I think you would like the song Hasadiga Yibawai from the Book of Mormon. It's a good one. It's a musical. You should look it up soon. Yeah, but yeah, I have watched that. That is cool. Oh, in fact, no, I went to the play at Orpheum in Minneapolis here. Yeah, I had a chance to see it as well about a year ago. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, see you guys. Goodbye. Bye, guys. Sorry, brain bug.